been a friend of mine. I'm leaving my life in your hands. People say I'm crazy and that I am blind, risking it all in a glance. And how you got me blind is still a mystery. I can't get you out of my head. Don't care what is written in your history, as long as you're here with me. I don't care who you are, where you're from, what you did, as long as you love me. Who you are, where you're from, don't care what you did, as long as you love me. Every little thing that you have said and done feels like it's deep within me. Doesn't really matter if you're on the run. Seems like we're meant to be. I don't care who you are, where you're from, what you did, as long as you love me. Who you are, where you're from, don't care what you did, as long as you love me. I try to hide it so that no one knows, but I guess it shows when you look into my eyes. What you did, where you're coming from, as long as you love me. I don't care who you are, where you're from, what you did, as long as you love me. Who you are, where you're from, as long as you love me.
Every generous act of giving with every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation of shadow due to change. In fulfillment of this, his own purpose, he gave us birth by the word of truth, so that we would become kind of first fruits of his creatures. You must understand this, my beloved. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, for your anger does not produce God's righteousness. Therefore, rid yourselves of all sordidness and rank of growth of wickedness, and become with meekness, and welcome with meekness the implanted word that has the power to save your souls. But be doers of the word, and not merely hearers who deceive themselves. For if there are hearers of the word and not doers, they are like those who look at themselves in a mirror. For they look at themselves, immediately forget that the law of liberty, and persevere, being not hearers who forget, but doers who act. They will be blessed in their doing. If they think they are religious and do not bridle their tongues, but deceive their hearts, their religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the word.
Lord, may God grant us wisdom and understanding. You know, when I was a kid, the adults in my life were very fond of telling me how grateful I ought to be, because things were so much harder back when they were kids. My dad often said, "We might have been poor when I was a kid, but we didn't know it at the time." He has fond memories of his childhood, despite growing up during the Great Depression. Despite having, for example, no indoor plumbing in those early days, and he was responsible for emptying the pot. And despite having to help his dad build homes when he would have preferred to be out playing games with his friends, he says to me, I was happy and mostly unaware of my family's financial hardship. My maternal grandfather was a pastor during the Depression, and in order to make ends meet, he worked in the steel forge in Lansing, Michigan. He said the language in that forge was quite different than in the church. I knew better than to ask my grandpa for examples. Sundays often included a potluck meal in which people brought what they could, which was mostly homegrown vegetables and that Jell-O salad, that green Jell-O salad. But it was the wealthy people that brought the meat. And everyone else was hoping they'd do it again, bring the meat, right? Years later, when I entered seminary, my grandfather said, "Son, the ministry won't provide riches, but it's a good life." That's how he said it. He'd shake his head. It's a good life, you know. And he was right about the ministry being a good life. And I suspect if he were alive today, he would be shocked at the net worth of pastors like Joel Osteen, $50 million net worth. His church's annual offering is $43 million. And I must confess, truth be told, if my grandparents were alive today, they would be flabbergasted to learn of the fair market rental value of the manse in which their grandson lives. No doubt they would remind me of how grateful I should be, and they would be justified in doing so. I am grateful. I am so very grateful for all the wonderful blessings of such a generous God. God has been so good to me. How about you? Sometimes when we reflect on the past, we see hard times, and we think back on those lean times, and we can even share with our kids and our grandkids how great life was back then. Even though we didn't have much money, we were happy. Some people even get poetic about the old days when they were younger and poorer, and a lack of funds actually left them less stressful and happy. Take a look.
You know, I often think we were happier then, although we were poor.
Because we were poor.
Aye.
My old dad said to me, he said, money won't bring you happiness, son.
He was right.
Aye.
I was happier then. I had nothing. We used to live in a tiny, tumble-down old house with great holes in the roof. House? You're lucky to have a house. We used to live in one room, 26 of us. All there. No furniture. Half the floor was missing, and we were all huddled in one corner for fear of falling. Room? You were lucky to have a room. We used to have to live in corridor.
Corridor? Oh, I used to dream of living in a corridor. That would have been a palace to us. We used to live in a water tank on rubbish tip. Every morning we'd be woke up by having a load of rotting fish dumped on us.
Paradise. We had it tough. I used to have to get out at shoebox at midnight, lick road clean, eat a couple of bits of cold gravel, work 23 hours a day at mill for a penny every 4 years, and when we got home, Dad used to slice us in half with a bread knife. Right. We used to get up in morning at 10:30 at night, half an hour before we'd gone to bed, eat a lump of poison, work 29 hours a day at mill for an 8-year lifetime, come home, and each night Dad would strangle us and dance about on our graves.
Aye, and you try and tell that to the young people of today. Will they believe you?
No.
There you go, there you go. Yeah, okay, well, truth be told, we can laugh, and it's funny, and we tend to do that, right? Well, you should have, yeah. But happiness is linked to wealth. Happiness is linked to wealth. Rightly or wrongly so, happiness is linked to wealth. Many of you will remember the Jeffersons theme. Remember that? We're moving on up to the east side with a deluxe apartment in the sky. Yeah, we're moving on up to the east side. I figured you all would sing along with me. We finally got a piece of the pie. Remember that? Remember that? Yeah. Moving on up. It's questionable, though. It's questionable to romanticize poverty when all too many people who are in poverty have no hope of ever moving up to the east side, or in this case, you want to be on the west side, right? You want to be closest to the ocean. Moving up the ladder out of poverty is much more difficult today than it was a generation ago. I hosted the young professionals from our church at the manse yesterday, and two of the couples are actually homeowners. That's huge. But buying a home today, the percentage of your income it takes to buy a home today in this area versus what it was a generation or two ago, come on. These are difficult times on so many levels. Financial security back then was an unrealized dream, but even though money was tight, I think most of us, in those earlier days when things were tight, still believed that the future was bright, that someday we would own a home and have things good, move on up, so to speak. We might have had to walk miles and miles to school, uphill both ways, in the snow. But we went to school. We had school. We had education, which is more than 90% of the people around the globe could say. Millions, maybe not 90%, I think that's another quote, I'll get there, but millions of human beings today don't have access to education. There's my 90%. We're the wealthy ones on this planet. We live lives that are beyond the wildest dreams of 90% of the people. So, yeah, we've got it good. We've got it real good. We are richly blessed, and we have so much to be thankful for. Yet to those who've been given much, much is expected, and maybe too much is expected. Despite our relative affluence, many parents with children at home feel like they're treading water. And in a sense, metaphorically speaking, they're begging for someone just to throw them a lifeline, right? But instead, we who are in a maybe different, less stressful stage in our life, we'll walk by these people who are treading water, and we'll high-five them. Oh, bend over out of the nice cabin cruiser. Bend over. High-five them. Wow, it's amazing all that you're doing. Thank you for all you do. And cruise on. And leave them there, struggling. And we're not even aware of what we're doing, really. Right? Despite our good intentions, I'm learning that that's maybe not a helpful response. Stress is taking its toll on many in our church family. And we're not alone. This past Wednesday, the Surgeon General issued a public health advisory about the impact of modern stresses on parents' mental health. And these are parents with dependent children, right? Not all of you that are parents that have it good and you're retired and kids are through college and you paid for their weddings and yeah, we're talking about those other parents. Considering that previous Surgeon General advisories have included risks of gun violence and smoking, the public is paying attention. And we in the church must do likewise. In addition to the traditional challenges of parenting, like protecting children from harm, I mean, we never had guards when I went to school, police with metal detectors checking guns. I mean, that just wasn't even a... But in addition to challenges of parenting today, like protecting children from harm and worrying about extreme financial challenges, there are new stressors for this generation. According to the Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, These include social media, youth mental health crisis, and increased financial strain. He said the cost of some necessities like childcare have boomed, and I'm quoting now, guilt and shame have become pervasive, often leading parents to hide their struggles, which perpetuates a vicious cycle where stress leads to guilt, which leads to more stress. This all came out in the report this week. Here's a alarming slide. I'm just going to share a few of these extreme differences between the reality of parents with children at home and the rest of us. I feel consumed by my worries about money. Money is a cause of a lot of the fights or tension in the family. I feel like no one understands how stressed out I am. My stress makes it hard for me to focus. When I'm stressed, I can't bring myself to do anything. Most days, my stress is completely overwhelming. I'm so stressed, I feel numb. Most days, I'm so stressed, I can't function. Folks, 41%. 41%. Say that. And for those scientific-minded, a randomized sample of this size would yield a margin of error of plus or minus 2.5%. So this is true 19 out of 20 times. We're talking about serious stuff. I know we live in a bubble and everything's wonderful for so many, but this is the reality, even in the bubble, for so many. Part of modern parenting's unique struggles are what the U.S. Surgeon General calls our culture of comparison, which is propagated by social media influencers, online trends that create unrealistic expectations of parents today. Do you realize, and this was another study I learned this week, Pew study did this, do you realize that parents spend twice as much time with their children today as they did when my parents raised me in the 60s? And we all probably kind of know this is true because it was all unstructured. See you at dinner time. I'll be yelling out for you. They didn't know where we were. There were no cell phones. You knew where your friends were by what bikes were left in the front yard in the neighborhood, right? I mean, we were free as a bird to do whatever we want. Climb trees. If we fell out, we'd die. Jump off of bike ramps that we break bones without helmets on. I mean, no seatbelt. We lived at a different time, and parents had it a lot differently. It was a permissive culture, and they spend half the time that parents today are expected to spend in all this highly structured, highly competitive, got to get them into this early, got to get them into that. Parents are inundated with social media in which they kind of feel the guilt of, we got to have more elaborate school lunch ideas and strategies for breaking generational cycles and videos on back-to-school party themes, and influencers, bake their own goldfish crackers. I should probably do that if I'm a good mom, or dad. Julie Romanowski, a parenting coach and consultant, says, that's the poison. That's pure poison. Comparing to anyone, whether or not you're a parent or have children, is toxic. There's that word, toxic. The parents Romanowski works with generally have one or two fairly typical children, good jobs, partners and co-parents, nice houses and in good neighborhoods, and yet they still feel like they're barely making it. She said, physically they look like they're fine. On paper they look great. But everyday reality, living day in and day out with children, they are barely hanging on. Now, I must confess I was going to take this sermon on the generosity of God in a different direction at the beginning of the week. And then the Surgeon General and a few other things happened this week that made me realize that I need to become more aware of the stress that many parents are facing, parents with children, dependent children, are facing. And I feel compelled to go in the direction that this sermon is going today. And I'll just say, I'm very proud of the Executive Board's decision to host a safe, child-focused Halloween event October 26th. But I'm even more proud of the organizers, Kathleen, Terry, and Joanne Extraordinario, that they have given all parents with dependent children a pass from any responsibilities of running that event. Don't worry about carving pumpkins. Don't worry about whatever, just enjoy it with your friends and family. I love that. I love that about our church. We listen and we respond in love. On this Thoughts and Prayers weekend, I've heard all kinds of raving reviews on the play. I'm encouraged that our very own Jack Messenger and his passion to address gun violence in America is raising money and awareness for Sandy Hook Promise and also charities that we support as a church. We're looking into possibly partnering with MiraCosta in the peer-to-peer counseling and tapping that in. We're exploring the possibility of tapping in with our long-standing Manhattan Beach Community Counseling Center. So I've got meetings with Jeannie, I've got meetings with Lance Honey, whose men's group raised $11,000 to address the angst of children and people who get to a place in their life where they just grab a gun and blow up, literally. We don't want that. Nobody wants that. I'm encouraged that our church is responding. We are listening. I'm encouraged that our very own Pastor Jody has heavy on her heart the need to develop a well-organized new health and wellness ministry team. And she is going to go and get additional training. She already has her CPE. She's almost finished her doctorate, but she's got some additional training she's going to get and bring that back to our church to help us be as responsive as we can be to help our church be well and healthy. Right? And part of her mantra is we need to do less better. And let that sink in. Our text for today says, "Let everyone be quick to listen." Isn't that an interesting phrase? Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. In the coming days, we would all do well to heed that call. I'm encouraged that our renewal task force is listening. It's hearing that many at MBCC are maxed out. And again, in Pastor Jody's words, we need to do less better. So please pray for our staff and lay leaders. They've been engaged in quite a bit of heavy lifting of late, and it really is an unsustainable pace. And we know this, and we're trusting that there is an end in sight to this heavy lifting, right? There's got to be, right? When we get to a place where we're all set, and we get all the right staff in the right place, and we're all headed in the right direction, we're all on the same bus, right? We have the vision, we have the mission, we have the culture, we have the strategic plan, and we're working the plan, but it's balanced, and we're healthy, and listening to each other, and trusting God to take care of the rest. Countless hours have been invested in foundational statements, surveys, listening conferences, and in a few weeks, our staff and lay leaders will participate in another very demanding weekend retreat, but it's very exciting for me. It's going to be a Friday and a Saturday. We have a consultant coming, and we're going to get all this good stuff focused. So we're going to have to make some choices. And part of that process of making choices is really good, wonderful, maybe even sacred cows with sentimental attachment are going to be parked so that we can do only the things that are really going to help our church flourish and be healthy, right? God has been so generous to so many of us. And with all that blessing has come tremendous responsibility. In the coming weeks and months, please join me in praying that we will do our very best to throw tangible and helpful lifelines to those treading in the water and not simply cruise by saying, "High five, good job, don't know how you're doing it all, but keep it up. Thank you for all you do." But that we throw them a lifeline, whatever that lifeline looks like, right? Whatever that lifeline looks like. The joy of the Lord ultimately is our strength. God has big plans for MBCC, but those plans do not include burning any of us out. Instead, let's all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and as we discern a sustainable pace to best enable us to thrive and grow, both as individuals and as a church family. Would you pray with me? And I'm going to do another thing that Kathleen Terry recommended we do. Let's have a moment of silence You know, that heavy breathing. Let's get our breathing to calm down, right? Exhale. We're just going to have a moment of silence, and then I'll close in a little prayer. Okay, just a moment of silence, just to get centered with God. Oh, generous God, take our burdens, we lay them down. There are many in our church with overwhelming stress, spouses whose minds are slipping away, marriages that are strained, finances that are tight, children that have to get here, there, and everywhere, anxiety, fear, uncertainty, heartache, health concerns. God, we lay them all down. We lay them all down. Help us to be quick to listen to your still small voice that says, I love you. I'm with you. I'll never forsake you. Even in the darkest valley, I'm with you. May we be slow to speak, slow to anger. Amen.